Hey everyone, this is Heidi St. John. Welcome to the Heidi St. John podcast. I am so glad that you guys are here today because I have a guest in my studio who has an amazing story of healing that I know you're going to want to hear. Chris Dupré is joining me in the studio today. He's an acclaimed worship leader, a musician, and a speaker, and he grew up in a small town in upstate New York with an unpredictable dad who was a World War II vet, struggling with PTSD before it was even diagnosable. And amid the financial fragility of a broken family, Chris has traced the fingerprints of God and still sees the Lord at work in his life today. His story resonated deeply with me. Many of you have heard me share my story over the years, and I believe that God is the healer and that when we follow him, we can experience the healing of the living God at work in our lives. So I hope that you will sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to be encouraged. Thank you guys for listening today. Before I jump into my interview today with my guest, I want to encourage you, if you've not left reviews for the show, go ahead and do that wherever reviews are available. We love it when you hop on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. It really does help with distribution, and it's a blessing to us. So we love to hear what you have to say, by the way, and we will read those reviews. So thanks for doing that. If you have a question that you'd like to have addressed here at the show, the way to do that is to go to HeidiSt.John.com/Mailbox Monday. And we sift through those questions. I answer them every week at Mailbox Monday. So we hope you'll do that. And if you haven't already done it, please set this podcast to automatic download so that every time a new episode drops, you'll be the first to know. We'd love it if you get on our email list. And if you want to walk through the Bible with me, I am taking women through the Word of God this year. And you can join me by going to faiththatspeaks.com. Well, I'm thrilled today to have Chris Dupré in the studio. We have a mutual friend who's been trying to make this happen for a long, long time.
Long time.
And it finally did. Chris, welcome to the studio.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Finally.
It's a joy to have you. And I know Steve is hooting and hollering all the way over in Kansas City.
I can hear him now.
I can hear him too. I am fascinated by your story. And as I was reading just a little bit of it, I told you I can understand why my friend would want us to talk, because I think we have similar backgrounds, certainly, and come from a similar place. But I'm curious, since you've never been on my show before, and this will be the first time many of my audience has been introduced to you, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're married, 47 years?
Yeah, well, this April will be 47 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
She's amazing, yeah.
You
I grew up
three daughters.
I have 3 daughters.
And 6 grandchildren.
6 grandchildren.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's all we're going to have.
There you go. That's not a bad number.
No,
6 is a good number.
That's not a bad number. I was expecting boys because I was an athlete.
Yeah.
And I was a fairly high-level athlete, played some pro sports, and so I was like, I'm going to get married, and I'm going to have 4, 5, 6 boys. I'm going to be
I'm going to
coach.
make my own football team.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to have my own team, basketball, track, soccer. And then, Andrea and Catherine and Melissa came out, and I am so glad I got girls. I love my girls.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, I have 5 daughters and
gosh.
2 sons. And there's something really special about daughters. I think obviously something wonderful about sons as well. But daughters have a tendency to sort of stay closer to their families. Mm-hmm. I think that's generally true. Not always, but generally true. And I love that the Lord gave me daughters. It's such a gift.
Well, after the 3rd one, someone said, oh, you didn't get your boy. And it's like, I am so glad I got my Melissa. She's just the sweetest little thing. So,
I love that.
Well,
I love it.
She's not little. She's 40 now. So there you go.
It goes by fast.
It does.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you and kind of where you grew up.
I grew up in a tiny little town called Marion, New York. It's about 30 miles east of Rochester, right on Lake Ontario.
Oh, yeah.
100 inches of snow.
I've spoken in Rochester. I know.
Have you really?
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. We used to call it Rottenchester. So...
we got our first visit there. My daughter got a tick. That's how I remember.
In Rochester, she got a tick.
In upstate New York. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy.
I think most people in Rochester have a tick. But it's a different form, but that's okay.
Different kind of a tick.
A different kind of tick. But I, when you're growing up, you don't know what your parents were like when they were 15, 20, 25, what they went through to become who they are.
Right.
So all I knew growing up, I had my mom and my dad, but my dad was, as you said in the intro, he was a World War II vet. But he was more than that. He was a bombardier on a B-17.
Oh, wow.
And which I found out later, he was afraid of heights.
Oh, wow.
So he was in an airplane all the time.
He was opening those bomb doors.
Yeah, he was right there. And the front of a B-17 is all plexiglass. Mm-hmm. And he would have to put his face against the plexiglass when the plane would take off. So here this guy is just filled with fear and yet doing this. Wow. Greatest generation and amazing. Yeah. But he went into the war with the nickname Nice Guy Dave. He was just a very calm, collected, nice man. Mm-hmm. On his 13th mission, they finally got through what's called the Siegfried Line between France and Germany, and he went to bomb in Germany and got shot down over Brandenburg, Germany. Plane, two different, an engine on each side began to smoke. His turret gunner's head was his best friend. His head was taken off. All sorts of things. A piece of shrapnel stuck his leather cap to the side of the plane. It almost went through his head.
How old was he?
He's, 40, he was 20 years old. Wow. Yeah, I mean, just a kid. Well, they were all kids. Mm-hmm. And he jumps out of the plane. 3 seconds later, the plane explodes. So it sent him reeling over backwards. He was knocked unconscious and then wakes up falling to the ground. He gets to 1,500 feet, and this is all connected to his story, which then becomes connected to mine. At 1,500 feet, he pulled the ripcord, and I heard him say to somebody one day, I learned a very valuable lesson, is never put your parachute on upside down. And yeah, so he puts his parachute on upside down. It instantly flips him over. His feet are going, and he's heading to the ground at 30 miles an hour to hit his head. And so he had to pull himself up, hold on to the cords, and steer with one hand, which you can't quite have the same kind of steering and accuracy. Mm-hmm. Goes over a group of trees, because you don't want to land in trees, and goes towards an empty field and finds out that it's a field where corn had been cut. Now, I grew up in farm country. My small town was farm country. Mm-hmm. And we used to use cut corn as swords as kids. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so it's like 10,000 swords just sticking up, and he knows he's going to
land on
that. He goes over to a spot where it's just snow, and he realizes at the last second there's no corn because it's a boulder. And he sticks his right foot out, stops himself with his right foot, and his leg breaks in 9 places. And so he is taken by the French underground. They don't have any medication because the Nazis had taken it all. So they literally have to give him over to the Nazis to see if they will give him medication. He's an officer. So they had respect for officers, even for the British and the American officer. Mm-hmm. So they did. They gave him medication, saved his leg, which he was very grateful, because he said, he very close to my leg. I want to keep it. And the option was to literally get gangrene and die, cut it off, or go see if they'll give you medication.
Go to the Nazis.
Yeah.
None of those are good options.
No, they weren't good. Yeah. But they saved his leg and instantly put him in Stalag Luft 3. Now, Stalag Luft 3, there's a movie came out in, I think, 1963 with Steve McQueen called The Great Escape. Mm-hmm. And that's where he was. He ended up going to where it was right after The Great Escape took place, which was 76 men escaped, 73 were captured, 3 got away. Of those 73 that were captured, 50 of them were shot in the back of the head. Their bodies were burned, and then they brought them back into the entrance so that every prisoner that came through saw their burned bodies. And so my dad walked through and saw the burned bodies, and because he had gotten medication, there was a Nazi youth who was a guard. He was a 15-year-old Nazi youth who abused my father until May of 45. So he was all the turmoil of being shot down, all that went with it. Back then they just called it shell shock. And he ends up in this stalag being abused by a 15-year-old. He would kick him where his leg was broken.
You say he was abused. What did you mean?
Well, he'd take the stock of his gun and hit him in the back of the head. I'd knock him out.
Yeah.
They would take him into another building. And in this Great Escape, Steve McQueen does stupid things, and they put him in this side building. Well, there was a side building there, and the side building was where you went and you kind of tormented some prisoners and brought them back so no one would see, because of the Geneva Convention, you treat prisoners with respect. Well, they took him out to a side building, and there the belts would come off, rubber hose would come off. One of the things that he hated the most, as I said, the guy would kick him where his leg was broken, but the stock of the gun, he'd just pop him in the head and either knock him out or just give him horrible headaches. So after all of that, he was when Patton came through, liberated his camp, and those young guys just took off because they knew what was happening to him. So he comes back from the war.
He's just messed up.
He's
now.
messed up.
Yeah.
And he's still Dr. Jekyll in the sense that he's brilliant. My dad was a brilliant man, and he was teacher of the year in New York State a number of times. He was the teacher's teacher in New York. He was amazing. And all the kids, he was their favorite teacher. But then he would come home, and I didn't ever see that great teacher. All I saw was a guy that would kick me, slap me. He'd take his knuckle and snap the top of my head. And he just walked by. He was angry. He couldn't handle the responsibility of being a father, a husband. He had to pay, in school, he'd walk into a room, everything was paid for. He goes home, he's got to pay for the water bill. He's got to pay for the rent. Yeah? And by the time I was 8 years old, I had lived in 12 to 14 places because he didn't follow through as a responsible man.
Couldn't keep a job.
He couldn't keep, Well, he kept a job. He just couldn't be responsible with his money.
Oh, so you couldn't stay in your house?
So no, I moved more than every year. Wow. And it got to the point where I was 5 or 6 years old. I had this this box that I would bring my clothes in, and when I get to a new place, I put them away in drawers, and I stopped doing that.
Where's your mom?
My mom is my hero. She was amazing. She didn't see anything. She heard an angry man, but she never saw me get slapped, get hit, she never saw any of that. And I was such a rough house little boy. I had an older brother, and I had friends, and we'd go out and we'd roll down hills. And so the bruises that I had, she assumed they were all just from me being
She never saw any of it. How did he treat her?
With respect. My mother flew planes and was a pilot instructor in World War II.
Long before DEI.
Yes, long before DEI, exactly. Long before women were doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
She was incredible. She was a top pilot. And
wow.
Until a new commander came in and said, we can't have women teaching men. And so they put her in, and she became head of the secretarial pool because she could type faster than everybody else.
Wow.
So she went from flying planes to typing. But she was amazing. And she kept us loved. Mm-hmm. I guess, where was your mom? She was the one I came home for. Mm-hmm. My mom's love, she knew how to hug. She knew how to kiss. She knew how to encourage.
Did your dad what was his relationship to you as it related to the things that he said?
I could never do anything right unless I followed through exactly like he wanted it to. Mm-hmm. He was always mad. And then when his brothers came around, he was the old guy Dave. I mean, I loved when my uncles were there because I saw this totally different person.
Mm-hmm. That you wished he would stay that way.
And he would be kind to me, and he wouldn't be faking it. That's kind of like who he was.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like having his brothers around gave him permission to be somebody he used to be.
Yeah, and his older brother Pete, my Uncle Pete, became the face of the Greatest Generation some years later. He played harmonica. He's known as Harmonica Pete. He went around the world. He played at NFL games and NBA games, and he'd do the Star Spangled Banner before these huge games with 70,000 people. Yeah. And I came to him one day and I said, my father had passed, and I'll go backwards a little bit, but I said, Uncle Pete, I'm doing this book about my dad, and you don't know things about my dad that I do because I live with him. And he told me this. He says, well, I didn't get what you got, but I saw him one time. We were fishing together. A boat got too close, so he went and he pulled the motor off the back of the boat and threw it at them. And I said, okay, multiply that times 100, and that's what I live with. And he got it. And so, that went through until at 8 years old, my mom finally saw one situation coming in the back door in the kitchen. We had moved again, and now we're living with my grandmother again, which we did every other time. And I'm flying across the kitchen floor, and she spots it, and next thing I know, we're on our own. The dad's not there, and
she left him.
She left him with 3 kids. Yep. Whoa. Yeah, she wasn't going to take that. I mean, she told me later, she goes, I thought there was something physical going on. I saw him slap at you once. But back then, she said, fathers did that. Mm-hmm. I said, Mom, it was so much more than that. But I didn't go into it. I didn't want her to feel bad. Mm-hmm. I love my mom. I didn't want her to know the whole story.
So you lived with your dad up until you were 8.
8 years old.
When your mom said, enough is enough.
Enough's enough.
And I'm imagining by this point, I mean, how much contact do you have with your dad after that?
He would come out a couple times a month on a Sunday to visit.
But they never got back together.
No. They were done. She was done. She would, yeah. Mm-hmm. There were things that I found out later that were within their marriage that she said, they didn't have much of a marriage the last few years anyways. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, about 8 years old, we're gone. And I remember coming home from school the first time, and this is the first time I'm coming home without my dad. And I remember walking into the house. She had made chocolate chip cookies, the old Toll House chocolate chip cookies, and the house smelled great. And she was there, and she got up, she came over and gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. I'll never forget, I was 8 years old. She said, how was your day? And I just remember smelling the cookies and Mom doing this, and I knew that I was safe. And at 8 years old, I just started to cry. It's like, why are you crying, babe? Because I'm safe. And thank you, Mom. So.
Yeah, it matters. I think sometimes parents don't realize, especially, I think about your dad, and he probably, I would imagine he didn't get the help he needed.
No.
They didn't give help, right? That was the suck it up generation.
It really was.
And they didn't give help. And it's almost as if when you've got somebody in that kind of a situation and they're upset, it's like the equivalent of coming home and something, rubs you the wrong way and you kick the dog.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so
I was the dog.
You're the dog. I mean, for lack of a better word, he was taking that out on you. I imagine this shaped you in a pretty profound way.
Well, I had an older sister. She got verbally abused. My brother is a year older, and he had a blood disease early on. So he was sick a lot and in the hospital. And I realized later that my dad basically kind of ignored him a lot. So my brother, the pain of his heart wasn't the pain of being abused, it was the pain of being ignored.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I came along and I was a healthy boy. And I got all the anger, whatever it was, it was directed towards me. But yeah, it shaped me not so much. I was a gregarious, fun-loving kid. I've always had friends. I've always, I'm a sports-related, my life was sports growing up. And I'd always find some fun things to do, and I'd be out until it was dark and I had to come home. But in terms of shaping me, what it did was I did not trust any man. Yeah. Every man was there to hurt me in some way. The only guy that wasn't was my best friend, Tom. His father, Don, was a kind farmer who treated me with respect. And it was like, there's one guy out there. Maybe I can be like that. Because I thought for sure, I'm going to grow up and be just like my dad. Yeah.
Well, that's the big one, right?
That's a huge
You
one.
just think, there's no way out of this thing that's been done to me. I don't know any better. I think, too, when children grow up in abusive situations, particularly when it's all you're born into it, that's your normal.
Oh, it was my normal.
Right. I mean, for the kid who's getting, knocked down the stairs or whatever, they don't know that other kids aren't getting knocked down the stairs.
Right.
You just kind of assume that that's the way things normally are. And I think this is how abuse goes on as long as it does, because the kids they have no reason to say, hey, this is happening in my home, because they just figure, well, this is happening in everybody's home. But I think it's a cautionary tale, too, to parents who are listening to say, listen, the decisions that you're making for your children right now are literally imprinting their minds for sure and their hearts
Totally do.
for life.
Yeah, and my town was such a small town that we had more liquor stores than any other stores. So it was a town of massive drinking constantly. The only things open in the evening was one pizza shop and a half a dozen liquor stores or bars, whatever it was. And so you were saying, other kids are going through the same thing. I know they were. They would talk to me about it. Their fathers were mean. They were cruel. Matter of fact, except for Don, I didn't know anyone else around that wasn't either drunk or abusing their kids or abusing their wives or being unfaithful.
It's amazing to me. I listened to you talking about your dad. My dad was a soldier more in the era of the Vietnam War.
Okay.
But I listened to you talk about your dad, and I think about my own situation, and it reminds me again how important fathers are.
Huge. That
fathers determine the trajectories of their families, And when Jesus was talking about fathers and children, he said, don't exasperate your children. Instead, you're to bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And when fathers fail to do that, I mean, as I honestly believe this, and I love to know what you think, but I just think as the father goes, so goes the family, right? If you can turn the heart of the father toward his children, you can change a trajectory for where Satan meant that family to go, and turn it around simply by turning the heart of the father.
The statistics, I wish I had them with me. I just said them somewhere and they went out of my brain. But I know generally, if a mother comes to the Lord, about 25% of that family will end up meeting the Lord. If a father comes to the Lord, it's like 90%.
It's amazing. I've seen that same statistic. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yep. And so one of the dictionary definitions of father is the one from which we get our significance. So I had a mom growing up, and she was loving on me. But I didn't learn things as a man from my mom. I learned things as a man from my dad, and he wasn't there, so I had to find it elsewhere, which were just older guys that were jerks, and they became my heroes. Like, when you're in ninth grade and there's a senior who's a great athlete, that's my hero. And some of them weren't the greatest of heroes.
So your dad's sort of absent then, really. I mean, up until 8, he's there, but he's not doing you any favors. And then your mom leaves, and now he's relatively absent. How did the relationship with your dad continue as you got older?
Well, that's where everything comes together, because from 8 to 19, I was just growing up in that house, and he would come around now and then, and yet by court order, we had to spend 2 weeks a year with him up on the St. Lawrence River, but my uncles were there. So for my mom, it was a safe place for me to go. But from there, sometimes he would take us up into Canada. We had relatives, and once that happened, when we went away from my uncles, I never knew what would happen. And he just hauled off and hit me once on the streets of Montreal once, because he thought that I had said something disrespectful, which I hadn't. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground, knocked out. My brother's holding me, and my dad's waiting. Get your blank up off the ground and let's go. And so
it didn't get better.
It didn't get better. I was 12 at that time, and so I hated him. I would see him now and then. I got bigger than he was. Suddenly I'm now an athlete at 190 pounds and 6'1", and he's 5'8".
There's an interesting. I'm not a Swiftie, lest anyone think. I don't want to confuse anybody. But years ago, I heard a song that Taylor Swift wrote called "Mean," and the chorus. She's talking about her dad.
Yeah.
And the chorus says, "Someday, I'll be big enough so you can't hit me, and all you're ever going to be is mean."
Wow.
And I thought, how many other kids is that? That was my story.
Wow.
Like, how many kids? She tells this whole story. You'll have to listen to it.
Yeah, I'm not a Swiftie at all, so I don't know nothing.
But I just thought it made me think of the decisions that we make for our children. Because you and I can sit here all day long and talk about things that happened in the past.
Sure.
But the point isn't to talk about what happened in the past. The point is to say the decisions that parents are making right now are literally writing the story of their kids' future.
Absolutely.
You're writing a story on the hearts of your children. I wrote a book called Becoming Mom Strong. And in that book, I told just a little bit. I just pulled the veil back a little bit on my childhood. My parents didn't get divorced till I was 18.
Oh.
But I pulled the veil back a little bit, and someone in my family asked me kind of a long time ago, why would you write this? Why would you write this in a book? And I said, boy, it's a sure. First of all, I knew that the Lord was wanting me to write it.
Yeah.
Because my story is a story of healing, and it's a story of just learning to forgive, which I think takes a lifetime in many cases. And you and I are going to talk about that in a second. But I think it's a cautionary tale for parents. Listen, you're writing a story on the life of your children, and someday they're going to tell it.
Yeah.
And it will be their story to tell.
Yeah.
It will be their story to tell. And I really hope parents are listening, because I have met, and it's not just men. I've met dozens and dozens and dozens of women over the 20 years that I've been speaking out on the circuit who would tell me, well, I just had a bad day. And so, I have an anger problem, or I have a drinking problem. And I'm telling them, these little ones that are watching you,
Right.
you're imprinting their lives.
Yeah.
And I do think the Lord holds parents responsible for that. It's the parents who
absolutely.
have the responsibility to train their children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Don't exasperate your children. It's a big deal.
Well, that happened to me, and you would think that going into a safe and nurturing place that would go away, but it didn't.
It doesn't.
It imprinted on my DNA spiritually, and got saved at 19 and heard about forgiveness and heard about it for me and figured, well,
When did you get married? How old were you when you got married?
I was 23.
I'm curious, did you take this into your marriage? I think it's interesting to talk to people who grow up in volatile environments, and then you get married and you're married to someone wonderful and your home is peaceful, and it's almost like you go into fight or flight. Like you don't know how to do life in this environment that's not chaotic and stressful and dangerous. And now it's impacting your family. And I'm just curious if that was your experience.
No, it wasn't. As I said, I got saved at 19, and right after that, I had an experience, without going into becoming too weird, but it was a face-to-face with the face of God, where his affection is just being poured over me. And it brought healing to my soul and my spirit like I had never experienced. It's in that book, and I go into detail. And, someone else can say, well, I saw angels, I did this. God bless you. That's awesome. I didn't. But all I knew is I was in one place, then suddenly I'm awake and I'm right there in his presence. And he's holding my face so that I can't look away out of shame. I have to look at him. And my own pain is like, here's this man, and his hands are the first time in my life where I'm being held safely. And he looks at me and says, for who you're called to be and what you're called to do, you need to know the depth of my affection. And a ball of fire went into my heart, and I ended up back in my living room, and my whole demeanor towards my father changed. Not that I felt this great love, but now I could begin the process of healing. I could begin the process of forgiving, which to me just looked, when I asked, Lord, I don't feel love for my dad. And I just felt in my heart, I wasn't, that was okay from him. He said, just honor him. Oh, so the way that my dad understood love for me was I began to honor him. I sent him Father's Day cards. I give him a Christmas card. I give him a birthday card and present and all that. And that didn't change my hurt so much at that point. But it changed how we related to a level of respect that we hadn't had before. Just because it was a process. And I got saved in 73, and the real change of our lives came in July 4th, 1982. So it was a 9-year process. And I was on my way to my father's house for July 4th because that was his favorite holiday, was celebration. And
you could see why.
Oh yeah, totally. Independence Day that was his day. And on the way there, I just like, oh, Lord, help me today to, and then I hear this little thing in my heart. Now, however people hear God, I don't know. All I know is this little voice that said, I want you to forgive your father today. And I said, Lord, I've forgiven my dad. And I heard 3 words, face to face. I went, ooh. And I'm now struggling in the car. No.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk. And my wife looks at me and she goes, what is wrong with you? And I said, I feel like the Lord wants me to forgive my father. And she goes, you did? I said, no, I think he wants me to forgive him face to face. And now she's known my dad. She just went, ooh, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. It's like, I know what that's going to be. And it's going to be anger. He could hit me in front of all. I got 41st cousins, and there's going to be a ton of people there with their kids. Yeah. And I thought, well, we won't get along. I just put up this little plea, said, Lord, make him by himself by the garden. And I knew that wouldn't happen. I walk in the house. He's been remarried to a beautiful Christian woman. And I said, where's Dad? And she goes, oh, he's by himself by the garden. Shoot, which is Christian swearing, which is exactly what I said. A lot of Christian swear words. Dang. Yeah. And I walked up to him, and I didn't know what to say. I had a whole list of things I was going to forgive him for. I was literally going through the list. Mm-hmm. And the Lord literally took that list and removed it from my brain and my memory. And he's pointing the garden out, and I said, Dad, I got to talk to you real fast before anybody comes over. He goes, what? I said, I want to talk to you about when you lived with us when I was little. And he said one word. He goes, what? Yeah, exactly. That's exactly, my face did that. I was like, no, I want to hear.
I knew this was going to happen.
What, honey?
Yeah.
Tell me, It wasn't. And I just said, and I was like, oh, Lord, help me. And all I got out was, I just want to say that I love you and I forgive you for whatever happened. And he didn't say a word. And I just put my arm around him because I didn't know what he was thinking. And the next thing you do, he begins to fall and he's weeping uncontrollably. And it's coming out of his eyes, his nose, and his mouth. He's drooling and snot. And it's just, I'm like, oh no. And he reaches around to grab me because he's falling to the ground. He grabs my waist, puts his thumb under my belt, and I begin to weep. And when the two of us are just going over with our butts hanging out, to all the friends and family that are around. And I am crying. I don't know why I'm crying. All I know is that something is happening, and it's gone on past the knowledge of my brain into my spirit. And 3 minutes later, we get up, and we're covered. And I said, Dad, he goes, what? I went, nice tomatoes, because we had to wipe ourselves off. And he goes, see the carrots. And, we just went back and forth until we were cleaned up. And what I didn't know is he said, I got to go and wash up. And he goes in the house, and there's my stepbrother's in there. And he looks at him and he goes, Dave, what happened with Chris out there? What happened? He goes, I think I got my boy back. And he did. That night, I never hugged him. I shook his hand as far away as I could get. Out of respect, I shook his hand, but I stayed at distance. That night, didn't even think about it. I just gave him a big hug. He goes, what is this? I said, sorry, Dad, it's a hug. I'm a hugger. Well, you don't hug here. I know. I'm not sorry. And he goes, do it again. So I gave him a big hug, and he goes, let me try it.
Oh.
It's like a little 5-year-old. Let me try it.
Yeah.
So he gives me a hug. He goes, let's do this every time.
Yeah.
I said, okay. Yeah. And we hugged like that for a while until I went away to a Catholic charismatic community. They asked me to come in and do some worship and to speak. And as soon as I get there, Brian comes up and gives me a kiss on the cheek. I'm like, oh. He goes, you're not used to that, are you? I said, not for men I don't know.
Now who's Brian?
Brian was the guy in charge of the retreat.
Okay.
He was in charge of this Catholic charismatic retreat. He'd seen me lead worship. He'd heard me speak, and he wanted me to be there that weekend. And so everyone's kissing. By the end of 3 days, I've been kissed 100 times, and I'm kissing dogs and trees and everything else. And my dad contacts me and says, stop on the way home. So I stop on the way home, and I give him a big hug, and I've been kissing. I didn't even think about it. I give him a kiss on the cheek, and he goes, whoa, what is that? I said, sorry, Dad. My dad was Catholic. And I go, I just been into a Catholic charismatic community, and everybody kisses. Do it again. So I give him a kiss, and he takes my chin, and he kisses me, and he says, let's add this to the hug. And so we had 8 years of hugging and kissing. he came to me one day and said, I prayed the prayer at the end of that 007 show. I'm thinking, James Bond has a show. What is the 007 show? And I just can't figure it out. I said, Dad, James Bond doesn't have a show. It was the show you told me about. Oh, 700 Club. So that was the 007 show. So I said, Dad, you prayed that prayer at the end. That's the prayer of salvation. He goes, yeah, I know what it is. I did that. I said, Dad, we're brothers. He looked at me and goes, I'm still your father. I said, yes, you are. And we just had the greatest 5, 6, 7 years together that redeemed every bit of pain, every bit of abuse. And so your question about, how about when you got married? Well, that face-to-face set me on a course of what the Father's face really looked like. And I asked God really clearly before I got married, am I going to be like my dad? And my wife answered it because I was praying. I was praying one time. I said, Lord, please don't and she just looked at me and she held me, and what a wonderful, great lady. She goes, I know who you are. You're nothing like your father. You're going to be a great husband, and you're going to be a great father. And that was the last time we ever talked about it. That was it. And at the end of our first year of marriage, I'm wondering, am I going to be an abusive husband? Am I going to be distant? And everybody said the first year of marriage is the toughest year.
Yeah.
And at our first anniversary, we looked at each other and we go, so what's the tough part? It wasn't. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's not because of me, because of her. It's because of God in us that did an amazing work.
And you have been, it seems like your life's message really shaped at that point.
Yeah.
Because you started talking about just this incredible, extravagant, unrelenting, incredible love of God and the heart of the Father. And that really seems to have shaped who you are.
What messages on the cross talk about Jesus going to the cross because of its great affection. So we all get that he loves us to the point where he died for us. But we have this detached, I haven't seen him, Father, and we're trusting in Jesus, he must be a good guy because Jesus really loved him.
Right.
But you look at John 17, and it says, and he's praying, that they would know that the same love you have for me is what you have for them. It's not that you have the same love, it's that they'd know that. And I just remember reading that. It's like, that's it. That's what changed my heart, was not just this superfluous Christian idea of the affection of God. It was a real revelation that this is how he saw me, that he smiled at me, that when I saw his bright eyes and his smile, that was his heart being reflected.
And why do you think that this message, this Father Heart message, is so crucial for right now?
Well, you go back to the definition. Father is the one we get our significance from. I walked a couple of my daughters down the aisle, and my heart was always prayerful in that my love is a securing, rooting love.
Yes.
So that by the time they get married, they get a love that soars, a love that multiplies, a love that reproduces. It's a different kind of love. It's a romantic love. I don't bring that, but I bring a securing love. You remove the securing love, you remove the rooting in love, and then what you've got is insecurity, and they are now looking to their husband to be what their father should have been. And if their husband doesn't get it, they'll look elsewhere. And whether it's another man or whether it's alcohol or whatever it may be, you got to fill that hole. And it's a father's job. My job was for my daughters to be convinced how deeply they're loved by me. That's my role. I knew it from the get-go that a securing, rooting love was my job.
And when people get this message, when they understand it, what kinds of evidences, what kinds of things do you see? And is it different between men and women?
It's men would like to think so. They'd like to think they're the strong whatever. But years ago, I was preaching in Illinois, and this farmer, he was in bib overalls. He starts coming up before I'm done, and I'm at the point though I've spoken about the Father's affection and gone and told a story, and he starts coming up, and everybody I found out later, this guy was a hardened old farmer. who never asked for prayer, who never showed emotion. He's weeping all the way to the front, and he falls into my arms, and he just goes, I am so sorry. I did not realize how deeply God loves me. He goes, because of it, I've been cruel. And he's in front of the entire church, and everybody's crying. And then all he did was hear a message. But when you get it, it changes everything. It really does. It changes, I'm a son who's a husband. I'm a son of a father who's a father. But if I remove my sonship, what I'm removing is the knowledge of my father. Then everything else doesn't become what it's supposed to. But I've seen over the years, people step into the father's arms and affection. It creates security. They become better wives. They become better husbands. I've seen kids.
Identity.
It's identity.
Yeah.
It's who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, we're having an identity crisis the size of New York in this country right now, right? We don't know what a woman is. We've got trans-identifying people. We've got like a move now to a movement called transhumanism. We're seeing, and I think to myself, this is not, I mean, obviously it's a mental health crisis.
Yes.
There's, no question about it. But beyond that, it's an identity crisis because we can't see ourselves reflected in our creator anymore. We've decided we don't have one. And once you know you have a creator, it changes everything. And when you figure out how much he loves you, well, that's healing. Now, all of a sudden, you can take what he says about you and actually believe it. But I think so many people see God as this sort of aloof, he's there, but he doesn't really care. He's not really going to get involved in what I'm doing or care about my life. But your experience is that that's absolutely not true at all.
Now, years ago, we took him out of the classroom.
Well,
and then we've been systematically removing him from every place
vestige
in society.
Yes.
So for someone to begin to talk about God as Father and God as good, they are looked at as kind of a freak and extreme. And so God equals extremism. And we have to return. And I think another wave is coming of revelation.
So too. Yeah, I think
and,
so.
And it's going to hit the country. It's going to, I think, be another powerful move of God. But, yeah.
Well, it requires obedience on the part of God's people. And I had seen at the end of 2024, the National Bible Association put out some statistics and said that there have been more requests for Bibles in the last year.
I read that
than
too.
they had. Yeah, in the previous 5 years combined. People are hungry and they recognize that what they're looking for isn't working.
Well, I was looking for that for my dad. I didn't get it. Something I got to throw in that was as big of a change from that moment by the garden was my dad came to me and called me and said, I got a problem. I said, what is it? He goes, they just took an x-ray of my chest. I'd been working in a hospital. I was a surgical assistant. I'd scrubbing along, and I thought I'd become a PA or a surgical, whatever. And he said, come look at the x-ray. I put the x-ray up, and I could not see his chest. I could not see his lungs. I could see nothing. It was just smoke. And he goes, what? I said, what'd they say it was? And he goes, well, they didn't. They couldn't see it. So we have to do, we got to do some exploratory surgery. I said, I'm taking you. So I took him in. He went 3 different times. The first 2 times they tried to do it under local anesthesia, and they're trying to go in to get a portion of the lung. It never worked. He was in pain. They couldn't get it. And the 3rd time he's going to go in and finally get under general anesthesia. I wheel him in, because I'd worked there. I wheel him in, and he's surrounded by the anesthesiologist, the physician, the medical student, PA, the nurse, and they're all around. They said, say goodbye to your father, say goodbye to Mr. Dupré. His wife gives him a kiss. But I'm standing by the side where the stainless steel bar is. And I'm going to say goodbye to my dad. But we've been hugging and kissing for years now. And so I can't kind of reach in and hug him, and she's not moving. And so I just reached over and I grabbed his hand and I said, love you, Dad. And he grabbed my hand and he turns to the doctors and he goes, we don't do this. And he said, well, what do you do? I said, he goes, let me show you. And he takes me and he pulls me over the bar. So my bar is coming down on my stomach. It's just killing me. But I didn't want to act like it was. I'm trying to just be cool. And he takes my face, takes my chin and back of my head, just like Jesus had held me. And he kisses my cheeks over and over. And he goes, this is my son. I love him. He's great. I felt like Jesus coming out of the water with John the Baptist. And he goes back and he goes, no, one more time. He goes, that's not enough. And this time he takes me with his hands on both sides. Well, now my cheeks are covered. I'm thinking, where's he going to go? I said, I know where he's going to go. And he just reaches in and pulls me to himself, gives me this big kiss on the lips. He goes, I love you. And he sets me down and he goes, take me away. Wow. And so they start to push him away and they get 10 feet and he goes, stop it. And they stop and they're all like, oh no, what's wrong? And he goes, turn me around. I can't see my son. So they turn the stretcher and they start pulling him. And he looks at me and goes, love you. And I went, I love you. He goes, no, I love you more. And I did the same thing. And he goes, no. And he pulls out his heart and he makes the sound. Yeah. He throws it at me and I catch it and I throw it into my chest. And the nurse next to me starts to laugh and cry at the same time. The other nurse is laughing, that's wheeling him backwards. And I pull out my heart and I throw it at him, making the sounds. And he pretends that I threw a bad shot and he pulls it into his chest. And then she starts crying and these nurses are crying. And the nurse turns to me. She goes, has it always been like this between you and your dad? I said, no. It was hard and painful. But the last 6-7 years, this is what our relationship has been.
What an awesome reminder that people who are listening to this who don't have good relationships with their dads still have time to fix it. I think sometimes you think this is not redeemable. Yeah.
And I just talked to somebody the other day who said, you shared this story with me and my dad was dying and we had no relationship. And I went in and I just held his hand and I just began to pray over him. And I was praying that God would do something before he passed. And he opened his eyes and he looked at me and goes, I love you. I'm so sorry. I love you. And then he died. And she said, I have the most beautiful thing that I carry in my life now.
Parents don't realize how precious it is.
Yeah.
Just that they tell their children, I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm so glad that you're my son, or I'm so glad that you're my daughter. I mean, this is true for mothers as well. You know, your kids need to know that you love them.
And I would add one thing. They need to know why we love them. And I always did this with my kids. I added the word because. I love you because. And then I would find something to tell them about themselves, and their eyes would light up. And I realized later on that truth is the truth of the dictionary of our significance. When they know I don't just love them generally, I love them because. Each one of those because is a root that goes down, that settles them, secures them, and then gives them wings to soar for their own children.
Yeah, I think too when our kids once we start to see our kids raising their kids.
Oh gosh.
That's when it really comes home, right? That's Paul saying, I don't have any greater joy than to know that my kids are walking in the truth. Because you know, when your kids are walking in the truth, you know they're going to train their children in righteousness. It's this generational blessing. Psalm 78 is, I think, a psalm of Asaph, but he says in that psalm that the decision of the fathers to turn their hearts toward God and obey him has an implication not on one generation, but on 4 generations. That the obedience of the fathers to teach the commandments of the Lord and to model it, right? Not enough to teach it. You can teach it, but if you don't model it, your kids are like, you're a liar, right?
Oh, they can see through.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it has an impact for 4 generations. And so the converse would be true as well. Like if you're not doing what God asked you to do, if you're not raising your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, if you are exasperating your children, that also is going to have a generational impact.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Well, I was just with some youth recently, and one gal came up. She said, I need some prayer. I was afraid to come up because you're a man and you're a dad. My dad was terrible. He hurt my mom. He abused me and my sisters in many ways. And I just said, I just want you to feel safe right now. That's all. And I brought, a gal over and just began to pray over her. And finally, she just came in and she gave me a hug up close. She went past her fear, and I just said, listen, you have no clue how your Papa in heaven, right now I'm going to smile. And I just get this big smile, and she gave this big smile. And I said, that's how he feels about you. His eyes light up, and his mouth goes wide at his smile for you. And so let's move from this father. Where is he now? She goes, he died. He goes, wow, how are you handling that? She goes, I'm glad he's gone. And just this generation, that is the story over and over and over again, is pain, disappointment, and we as moms and dads, that's my job is to, I hate to say it, to suck the life of God into me so that I can give the life of God out of me.
Yeah. I think, I think when you think about your story and how the Lord, because really it was the Lord that allowed that reconciliation
Oh my gosh,
between you
absolutely.
and your dad. I was speaking, my dad died in COVID, and I was speaking in Los Angeles the weekend that he passed away. And we were never able to reconcile. And it wasn't for lack of trying. And I remember, getting the call.
He wouldn't go there with you.
No, I think he just could not. I think he could not reconcile with his own dad. He was beaten and abused by his dad. And then he did the only thing he knew how to do, which was to beat and abuse me. It was a generational cycle that had been playing out in my family for decades. But I had him talk to my youngest daughter, and he was dying at this point. We could see, we called him on FaceTime, and he was in the hospital. And of course, the stupid regulations of COVID and all those things, people watching their parents dying on FaceTime. And that was our story as well. But when he passed away, the next morning I was flying home, and I was stumbling through LAX. It just felt like it wasn't because I didn't have a close relationship with my dad. And so it wasn't that when he passed away, I felt this terrible pain for missing him.
Sure, I got it.
It was the understanding that the opportunity to fix it was gone, and that you never would get that chance again. And Pastor Rob McCoy, who was pastor in the church that I was speaking at, he'd called me, and he said, Heidi, your dad never understood what a treasure he had in you, but he understands now. And reminded me of the love of my Heavenly Father, right? And as I've gotten older, I think it's been, I don't know that it ever really truly goes away, this desire to hear, I love you from your parents. And if, people are listening and they're like, man, I never got that. It's great for you, Chris. I never got that. I guess I want, and I think what I hear in your message, which I think is so important, is to say you do have a Father who loves you. That kind of love does not have to be elusive to you because it's available, right? And it comes from your Heavenly Father, who the Bible says in Zephaniah rejoices over you with singing.
I know.
Right? It's an incredible, extravagant love. And I think that the Lord, who sees these broken relationships, because you're right, the cultural landscape is littered with them. And I meet them, out on the weekend, out on the roads, and almost every weekend I meet people who are broken. And in so many cases, it's the parental relationship that hurts the most, right? And God still says, I have healing for you. And it may not come earthside. It may not come in the form of a reconciliation with that parent. But God's love really does cover a multitude of sins, even generational ones.
Yeah. Well, just saying that it's so true. It doesn't always end up in the same kind of story. I mean, people come up to me and goes, well, my dad passed a long time ago. I have no way to reconcile. I said, the heart of this message is not so much that someone is reconciled. I love that. I mean, I get letters and emails all the time from people that I took that message. I went back. I forgave my father. I began to honor him. I forgave my mother, and we're reconciled now. We're having the greatest. I love that. But the message is not, I appreciate earthly reconciliation, but the message is to understand of a father's affection that you can have every day that is real, that's not just some ethereal kind of a thing of someone in the sky that's on a throne somewhere. Mm-hmm. This is a real God who loves passionately, extravagantly.
Yeah. I love that, the
the
overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Yeah, and it feels reckless.
Yeah.
Because it frees you to be you.
Yeah.
The more I know I'm loved, the more I am me.
Yeah.
The more my kids know the love of their parents, the more they don't have to be someone else to get it. And
boy, that's good.
yeah, and so my dad is pulling his heart out. He's throwing stuff at me. He begins to kiss his fingers and begins to shoot love bullets at me. And I'm doing the Matrix thing, and I do the same thing to him. And he gets into the elevator and kisses his thumb, and the doors close. And he just said, "I love you." And that's the last time I saw him alive. Mm. So I have an incredible gift, and I know it, which is the last moment of his life. He knew something was coming, and he decided to put it all there on the line. And he just was totally not embarrassed at all by the kind of affection he gave to me, and I was totally not embarrassed by the kind of affection that I received from him. But I got a gift, and I realize it, and for me and for my heart, because that's not just for you. Tell the story. Use the story to open up hearts. And then let me come into those hearts and show them how I really feel about them.
When you share the story, what is your hope that the parents who are listening take away from it versus what children, maybe they're not even children, young adults, or even grown-ups like Heidi St. John or whoever, maybe they didn't have that experience and they still have hurt in their relationships with their parents. What are you hoping that parents who are listening, who still have an opportunity to tell their kids, "I love you"?
Yeah.
What are you hoping that they're going to take away?
Well, one is what you just said. They have an opportunity. My dad had an opportunity, and he knew it was coming to an end. And right then he just said, "I'm going to lavish affection and love on my son." And we don't take the opportunities that sometimes God gives us. As a parent, I have to do that. I have to tell my wife every day she's beautiful and why I love her.
Yeah.
Because a day goes by and she doesn't. No, she's not insecure at all. But that's, as a husband, that's what I'm supposed to do as a husband. As a father, I have to tell my kids why I love them. I have to tell them that they're loved. My daughter the other day, out of the blue, just said, "Dad, I love you so much." It's just a text that came to me. And it wasn't out of the blue. There's seed that went into that years ago.
Yes.
And I just am getting the fruit of it. And so, number one, I pray over them that the past guilt and shame of what they've done wrong would be lifted from them, that they've got opportunity now, and they're going to be stupid, and they're going to make mistakes still.
It's amazing that pride keeps you from.
Oh, my gosh.
It's pride.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pride that keeps you from calling your son or your daughter to just say, "Hey, I love you. I love you."
Years ago, I embarrassed my daughter in front of her friends because she had done something. I should have waited for her to get home, but I chastised her in front of her friends. Shortly after that, I'm speaking at a conference. There's 2,000 people standing in front of me. She comes into the building and sits up in the back with her friends. And the Lord said, "Don't you dare speak until you've apologized to your daughter in front of her friends." And I go, "Oh, okay."
Dude, the Lord told me the same thing.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's so cool.
I chastised my kid one time in front of. She had it coming. Okay.
Oh, so does she. Yeah.
She had it coming. But I'm so tired. I went back upstairs, got in bed, and the Lord was like, if you're gonna chastise her in front of these guys, you need to go down and apologize in front of her friends.
It's awesome.
And it's his father heart, right? Because the Lord's like, I'm not going to let the enemy drive a wedge between you and your kid because you just basically humiliated them in what could be considered a public space.
Yeah.
So now you can fix it in public, right?
Well, I did. He wouldn't let me talk until in front of but 2,000 people. I'm apologizing to my daughter.
Yeah.
And she's crying. I can hear her in the back. And I'm crying, and we're crying together. And I look out, and just dozens of people are weeping.
Because it's everyone's shared experience.
Yeah.
Because the adversary is after the parent-child relationship. He's after it.
Well, if you can cut that, you've cut generations.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's 100% true. And I think for the person, for the mom and the dad or the young, adult who's listening to this, that you never got that, the healing is still available. And God offers it in abundance. And I will tell you, because so much of your story resonates with me. A lot of, my fears of having a child were related to, I'm going to be a terrible mother.
Yeah.
I'm gonna injure my kid in the way that my dad injured me. My kids are gonna fear me the way I fear my father. So afraid of embracing motherhood because I was so sure I was gonna screw it up. And we were at like a childbirth education class. I always tell people, those are the ones where they lie to you and they tell you if you breathe a certain way, it won't hurt, right? We're sitting there,
yeah.
right? We're in these classes, and everyone left, and I just started sobbing. And the woman, I'm maybe a week away from having a baby, my first baby. And she comes up to me, she goes, what do you don't need to be afraid of childbirth. Your body was made for this, it's going to be fine. I was like, I had never had a baby. I didn't know to be afraid of that part of it. That was on my second child. My first child, I was way too naive. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm afraid I'm going to be a terrible mother. I don't think I can actually do this. And she said, God's made you new. Just put her hands on my belly. And she said, God's made you new. And all those things that happened in your past, the Lord sees none of that. He sees you as a new creature. And the Lord's going to help you be the mother that he wants you to be.
And how many times have you done that to other people?
Oh, man. Many.
That's your life.
Many
Exactly.
times. Yeah.
And we go through this stuff that you and I both went through with fathers that were idiots. And you didn't get the reconciliation. I did. It doesn't matter, because what got into you was understanding who you are and the daughter of who you are.
Yes.
And suddenly you realize that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. And there is that, I think the desire, and I always want, parents to really know this, because God's desire is that we would have whole relationships with our children. And I think it's so easy for us to get into patterns where we're prideful. We don't want to say we're sorry. I think my kid owes me an apology before I'm going to go to them.
Right.
Because after all, whatever, fill in the blank, we make up our own excuses. And the enemy uses it to create patterns of generational sin. And then we see it repeat itself over and over and over again. And God's heart and his love is so different than that. His love is an extravagant love, because he came to us while we were shaking our fist at him. And we were shaking our fist at the one who made us, and he sent his son. And yet I talk to parents all the time who would say, my kid wronged me. And until that child comes back, that's not God's love.
Yeah.
That's not how God did it. It's amazing when we can stop and say, I love you. And you don't need the condition that you get from that child, or you don't need a condition from your parent, because God's love was unconditional. And if ours is unconditional, like his, and maybe you say, I'm sorry, you try to make it right, and the parent doesn't accept the love, right? Or the child doesn't accept the love that you're trying. There's an epidemic right now happening. Chris, you may not know much about this, but I would be curious what you have to say, or if you've even heard of it. But there is a literal epidemic right now of parents that I hear from. I try not to cry because I hear it all the time, who have done an amazing job, not a perfect job, but an amazing job of raising their children. And for whatever the reason, the kid goes to see a therapist, or whatever reason, they're ghosting their parents.
Yep.
If I had a nickel for every time I've heard this in the last 4.5 years, I'd have some serious cash right now.
Wow.
And I can only see it as a direct attack from the enemy, because there's no one who wants that love more than a parent who is desperate for their child to love them. And for no reason at all, that child just says, glad I got out of that environment. Or worse yet, they'll say, oh, my parents were abusive, and the parents were not abusive.
Right.
Like they weren't. But I don't know if you're hearing of those stories now, but I hear them all the time. And it's heartbreaking. And it's the same thing that you went through, just wrapped in a different package.
The world that I'm in, I do hear that all the time. And I look and go, well, there's a lot
The
of...
ghosting thing?
Yeah, the ghosting thing. There's a lot of different kinds of fathers. And there's, the passive ones, the ones that just aren't around at all, or they're in the house and they're still not around. authoritarian, abusive. But then there's moms and dads that are good. But one of the things that I've seen over the years is parents that have been good parents. The kids don't have any, major things to hang on that's negative.
Right.
So they take the littlest
and they build a capital
mistake,
case out of it.
They build a capital case out of it.
Yeah.
And they compete to see who has the tougher story. I don't want to compete with you about who had the worst father and whatever. That, as you said right in the beginning, we got to move forward. We don't live in the past, but we use it to grow from.
Yeah.
But boy, I sure have seen that. And it kills my heart because
does me too.
I know some of these parents are
Yes.
just incredible people.
Yeah.
And I know abuse did not go on in the home. And I know they yelled at their kids and they weren't perfect parents.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
boy, it's hard.
It's hard for me because I hear some of these stories and they're gut wrenching.
Yeah.
Parents who are like, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden my daughter won't talk to me or my son won't talk to me. And I wonder if you have encouragement for those parents whose hearts are breaking, who are, in fact, it was just the other day that I had a friend in town, also a homeschool mom. And she said, man, Heidi, the stories I'm hearing from parents whose kids are being told, it's like what you just said. They take the little tiny sip. They don't have anything to hang on. They're looking for, I need a reason to be angry.
Oh, yeah.
So here's the reason, you didn't let me, whatever. You made me finish my homework too many times. I don't know what the stupid thing is, but these parents are just heartbroken. What's your encouragement to parents who really, they did do everything right. And for whatever reason, their kids have just been like, see ya.
That's a tough one. My only advice is that two things. One is how you see yourself in God is everything in life. If I don't understand my sonship, then my parenting will fail when my kids fail.
That's good.
And so I have to be rooted and grounded, going to Ephesians 3 again. I've got to be rooted and grounded in who I am. And it's an identity issue. The world is going crazy with identity. Well, the church, the fact of this, they don't have their identity of who they are in God.
Come on, that's it.
And so when fathers and mothers are sons and daughters first, then when the kids ghost them and do what they do, they're not thrown by that because they know who they are. Their hearts might hurt.
Yeah, it's not that you're not hurt by it, but you're not. But it doesn't steal your identity from you.
It doesn't take from you and doesn't rob you of life, which is the big thing. I just see too many people robbed of life, and my thing is to go back and say, I am your friend. I see who you are, and I can try to convince them, but that's not going to do it. So I'm going to convince you in your heart to find out who you are. That's what I want you to do, because you're a wonderful mom. You're a wonderful dad, but my words aren't enough. You need to know that you are loved and that you're a loved son. Years ago, I felt the Lord tell me, he says, who are you? And so I went to my friends and I said, who am I? The Lord, I need to come up with an answer. And they said, you're a really good friend. And somebody else said, oh, your wife loves you. You're a really good husband. And your kids, you're a good father. And so I heard all these things. And it was like, it didn't do it.
Yeah.
It wasn't my identity. It's things that I did. And I went back. I said, okay, God, that was fun, but you had the right answer. What's the right answer? And I heard as clear as day, you're a loved son. That's it. That little phrase, you're a loved son. I'm loved and I'm a son. I could be loved and I could be a neighbor, or I could be a son that's unloved. But you put those two together, a loved son and a loved daughter. When that goes down, everything else around you takes the place it's supposed to, as opposed to stealing your place.
Boy, that's good. It's so good. It's so important. And that acknowledgement that your worth comes from the Father who made you.
Oh, totally.
And that his love for you is unconditional. And he wants to have this deep, abiding relationship where he gets to lavish that love on you for the rest of your life. It takes the fear out of following God.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's stepping into an arena that's, terrifying for whatever reason, because you know who you are and you heard his voice and you followed him. Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice and follow me. Right. And when we do that and our identity is secure in him, all of a sudden his heart and his plan for us opens up in front of us. And it's game changing as opposed to living in this thing where we're constantly trying to, whether it's a parent who's trying to get the approval of a prodigal child or a child who's trying to get the approval of a parent who's withholding that love from them. If we can get our love, this is what I'm hearing you say, if we can get our love appropriately from God and we see it for what it really is, that's when the real healing begins.
Yeah. Ephesians 1 talks about the knowledge of him to have wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. And when I got saved, this preacher got up and he talked about wisdom and revelation, and he had us pray for that. Well, that's good. I want wisdom. And revelation is, I get this over time. And revelation is a download of the Holy Spirit from God at the moment. But it's in the knowledge of him. Mm-hmm. So it's not just something for myself. It's in knowing him. Well, it's not like I know things about someone. It's the word, the knowledge of him means to know the heart of him. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm after. So I'm praying for wisdom in the heart of him. What's his heart like? I want the revelation. I want the immediate download that comes. And that's the Father message. It's a rooting message. Knowing who you are as a son, knowing who you are as a daughter. My role as a son made me a better father. It allowed me to be the husband that I was scared, that I might be, and I didn't turn out that way. Mm-hmm. And the same thing, even with my own father. What happened at the end was just the exclamation point of a journey I had been on. Mm-hmm. And my father lavishes all this affection. And it wasn't just a reconciliation with my father. Mm-hmm. It was to push deep into my heart the knowledge of this is how your heavenly Father, through his eyes, this is how your earthly father figure feels about you. He wants to hold you. He wants to hug you. He wants to pull his heart out for you. I just remember going up and they said, "Do you want to see the body?" And I said, "Yeah." And I walked up, went upstairs. Marion walked in. She cried over him, and it was my turn. I walked up, and I just looked at him. I knew it was a shell. I knew he was gone. I knew he was in the presence of God and enjoying life like he never had. But I just remembered, "Dad, I'm going to miss your hugs, but I'm going to miss your kisses." I remember kissing his cheek and walking away. And then at that moment, I realized he poured all that affection out because I think he knew he was going to die. Mm-hmm. And that affection, along with my own journey in God and in his word, changed my life forever. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm doing with it.
I love it. You've written an awesome book, The Wild Love of God. Tell me a little bit about this and where listeners can find it.
Yeah, my own website, just my name, chrisdupre.com, and The Wild Love of God is my story, and it centers around the garden. The first so many chapters are I'm at the garden, just about ready to talk to my dad, thinking about this, and now going through my history, his history, our history together, and then finally up to the point where I finally turn to him and tell him that I love him and that I forgive him for whatever happened. And so I wrote that. It's done very well. I love the responses I get constantly from it, from people that get it and read it. And the reconciliation that's taken place has just blown my brain.
Boy, we're not good, I think, in this culture. We're not good at reconciliation. We don't know how to do it. The church doesn't have a real good theology for reconciliation. But I really hope that a couple things I hope come out of this interview. I hope that parents who have time still with their children make every effort that they can.
Take advantage of it.
Take advantage, because you just do not know when you won't get another opportunity. And the love that you can give to your children while they're still alive will be passed on for generation to generation to generation. That's how God intends for families to work. It's so powerful.
I got that download from my father. I have an older sister, an older brother. I love them dearly. My sister led me to the Lord. My brother's my best friend, but they didn't have the same connection, reconnection with their father, my dad. And it changed how they did life.
It absolutely does. Yeah, all of my siblings, there are 7 of us, and all of us had different relationships, various relationships with my dad. And I think we had to sit down together, several of us, not everybody at once, but several of us, the sisters, sat down And I had to tell my little sisters, I'm happy that you have a good relationship with Dad, because that's going to help you in the rest of your life. And we gave each other permission to just let the relationship be what it was.
Good.
So instead of trying to sort of fix something for another one of the siblings, we realized, just like you, those relationships were individual. And what happened in one relationship, whether it was good or bad, didn't really have a bearing on the other person's relationship. But again, it's another really important lesson for parents to treat your children as individuals. Just because you think you've said "I love you" to your kid doesn't mean they necessarily heard it, and they need to hear it. It's so
your
important.
lack of jealousy for them to have a different relationship than you had freed them to have it. If they saw in you as an older sister you pulling back and wanting to see strain and anguish with your dad that you had, because I had it, and you weren't after that.
No.
You were not jealous for them to enjoy your father. That's huge. That freed them.
Well, that came largely just in a healing that had happened in my own life, apart from my dad, right? And that's what the Lord does. He's the healer. And I remember very clearly, the Lord telling me when Savannah was born, that I would live to see a generation of children free from the abuse that I had suffered, and that my dad had suffered, and that his dad had suffered. And when my daughter, who's 33 now, was pregnant with her son, who's almost 12, when our first grandson, I had a Doppler at my house, and I said, "Hey, let's see if we can hear his heartbeat." We hadn't heard his heartbeat yet.
Oh my gosh.
So she laid down, upstairs on the bed at my house, and we listened, just real quiet. Just took a few minutes, and you just hear that sound. Boom, 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 boom. It's so beautiful.
And
I just started bawling because I knew that the Lord had answered that prayer in my life, and that I was going to live to see my grandson set free. It's the following Jesus, and it may, the path that we take is hard, I think, in many ways, for lots of reasons. We live in a broken place, broken by sin.
Very much so.
But the healing always comes from Jesus. Whether the healing ends up materializing in a relationship that brings true reconciliation, like it did between you and your dad, or whether it leaves that what you wanted unfulfilled, that's when the Holy Spirit comes in and says, "I'm your dad. I got you." And I needed to hear that. I needed to understand it. And in understanding it, it helped me love my sisters and want for them what I never had. But it comes from the Lord.
Yeah.
It comes from the Lord. And there are lots of different families that listen to this show. This is going to be downloaded tens of thousands of times. And I want people to understand that where you came from isn't nearly as important as where God wants to take you. And where he wants to take you is into his healing. And that comes from understanding how loved you are.
I took that, and I'm a movie guy. My brother's a movie professor, movie critic as well, and I wrote a screenplay for it. And went out to California, worked with some guys that are out there. It just got optioned to be a major motion picture called Mission 13, which is he went down on his 13th mission. So I'm just praying that this message through this simple book will years ago, I went out to California, and I was at a church, and this group gathered around, and we go, "You're new here. Can we pray for you?" I said, "Sure, go ahead." They didn't have a clue who I was, and two were young kids, and one was this real old guy, and it's like, "Well, this is great." And they said, "I don't know what's going on, but you're going to do something. You're going to write stuff, and it's going to come off a screen." He goes, "Millions of people are going to see this." And I didn't say a word. That was my heart's desire, and I was in the process of writing this. I said, "Well, if it's going on the screen, I got to do a screenplay." So I did, and it got optioned, and we're in the process of the funds. It's funny, I shared this story this past Sunday, and I've never had anybody come up to me and say, "I think I know who needs to be your father." But this week, two people came up, totally separate, and they both said the same name, was Dennis Quaid. They said, "You got to go get Dennis Quaid." I said, "I don't know Dennis Quaid." So thanks anyway. But I'm, that kind of a man, that kind of actor that loves God, that understands what Father is about. I've got other people with other suggestions, but I just thought it was kind of funny. So
Yeah, I agree. And the message is important. And I'm so happy for what the Lord's done in your life and for what he's doing in the lives of other people, because you've allowed him to work through your story. So
well, you as well. We both are survivors, and we're more than that. We're victorious. And
Indeed.
So thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
If people want to find you online, where can they go?
Just ChrisDupré.com.
All right, I'll put your book here so people can see it. You guys
There
are
you
watching
go.
this thing on YouTube. Chris Dupré, truly an honor to have you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much.
If you guys want more information on my guest today, head on over to the show notes. You can go to HeidiSt.John.com/podcast. Listen, I know a lot of you have come from broken homes, and maybe some of you are still really hurting. And it is my hope today that you will take some time and really spend it with the one who made you. You are loved more than you can possibly imagine. And God really does have an extravagant love for you that will unfold in a plan that he's already writing. We love you guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you right back here again at the intersection of faith